Chaos erupted inside a Washington, D.C. federal courtroom this week. And no, I'm not exaggerating. A federal judge, Judge Zia Faruqi, absolutely tore into the Trump regime's Department of Justice lawyers. He didn't just scold them, he obliterated them. He called them out for abusing the Constitution, for playing games with people's lives, for turning the machinery of justice into a propaganda stunt. And make no mistake, this was not business as usual. This was a moment where the robes of a federal judge became the armor of democracy, where the gavel struck not just wood, but the very nerve of a nation being pushed into authoritarianism. Let's break down exactly what happened, because this hearing exposes the Trump regime's so-called law and order crackdown for what it really is: fascist cosplay dressed up as justice. The case on the docket involved a man named Edward Dana. His crime? He was allegedly intoxicated, allegedly broke a light fixture, and allegedly shouted that Donald Trump was part of the Russian mafia. That's it. That was the big federal case. The Justice Department tried to turn this drunken outburst into a matter of national security. They jailed him for a week. They wanted to press heavy charges. They wanted to make an example out of him. Think about that. Instead of focusing on violent crime or corruption or protecting communities, the Trump DOJ wanted to throw the book at a guy for yelling at a protest. That's not justice, that's intimidation. Judge Faruqi saw right through it. He looked at the government's lawyers and said flat out, "We are past the point of a constitutional crisis. This is embarrassment. This is shame for the United States government." Then, in open court, he turned to the DOJ lawyer and said, "Shame on you. You are a shameful human being." Those are not words judges use lightly. That was the sound of a federal judge erupting against the abuse of power. And the judge didn't stop there. He mocked the entire approach of Trump's Justice Department, saying this was all about chasing stats for Twitter, for press releases, for Truth Social memes, not about real law enforcement. In the real world, the judge said, you pursue actual crimes, not reposts on social media, not drunken shouts at a protest. This is the United States of America, damn it! Do you hear that? That's the sound of the Constitution shouting back against a regime trying to suffocate it. The government's strategy was clear. Arrest first, figure it out later. Round people up off the streets, drag them into court, pile on charges, and hope something sticks. And if it doesn't, no big deal, they already got their headlines. But grand jury after grand jury has been rejecting these cases. And remember, in a grand jury, the defense doesn't even get a seat at the table. It's just government prosecutors presenting their case. If jurors are still throwing those cases out, you know the prosecutions are flimsy at best and corrupt at worst. Judge Faruqi was furious. He apologized to Edward Dana for what he'd been put through. He told the prosecutors, "You are not serious people. You are children playing cops and robbers." And then he asked the question that should haunt every single official who played a role in this farce. What's to stop anyone from being rounded up off the streets in Washington, D.C.? That's how close to authoritarianism this regime dragged us. And it wasn't just about this one case. The judge pointed out the larger pattern. He blasted the DOJ for sloppy, corrupt, anti-democratic work. He ridiculed their excuse that they were just working out the kinks. These are people with names and rights, the judge thundered. You are torturing them. You are ruining their lives. Then he issued an order. The DOJ had until 5 p.m. to file a full explanation of exactly what they had done and how they had done it so badly, because the judge wasn't going to let them just sweep this under the rug. He said, as of now, we still have a constitutional democracy. And as long as we have a constitutional democracy, I will do my duty as a federal judge. Do you understand me? That's a warning shot. That's a line in the sand. That's a reminder that the judiciary still has the power to push back against executive abuse. The judge also raised the question nobody in the DOJ seemed willing to answer. What about the people's lives are destroyed when these cases collapse? An arrest goes on your record forever. Even if the charges are dismissed, it can cost you jobs, housing, education. It can change the arc of your life permanently. And the DOJ's attitude was basically, oops. And then came perhaps the most stinging critique. The DOJ lawyer tried to blame his superiors, saying the decision to prosecute came from higher-ups. Judge Faruqi cut him off. "I don't care," he snapped. "Don't pass the buck. Don't tell me it was Janine Pirro or the head of the criminal division. You all have time for press conferences. You all have time for Fox News hits. But you don't have time to take responsibility for trampling people's rights." That's the heart of it. This wasn't law enforcement. This was theater. And people's lives were being destroyed as props in that theater. Now, zoom out beyond this one case. Across the country, we've seen the same authoritarian cosplay. In Chicago, ICE agents arrested a woman outside her domestic violence hearing. Think about that. A survivor shows up to court for protection only to be snatched off the courthouse steps. Advocates now warn survivors to avoid in-person hearings because they fear deportation more than they fear their abusers. In Ohio, a 24-year-old asylum seeker who had followed every rule, attended every check-in, was dragged from her car by officers who refused to show badge numbers. Hauled off not to a police station, but to the back lot of a U.S. bank where she was handed over to ICE. Imagine living in America and seeing law enforcement act like a mafia handoff crew. And then there's Nori, a teenage honor student, a track star, deported to Guatemala, a place she didn't even know, a language she didn't speak. She dreamed of going to college in California, of becoming a fashion designer. Instead, she was ripped away from her home, her school, her cat, her life. For what? For cruelty's sake. Because this regime believed cruelty was the point. This is what Judge Faruqi was railing against. He saw through the facade. He knew these prosecutions weren't about safety or justice. They were about fear, intimidation, and headlines. He told the courtroom, the government's message to people who look like Mr. Dana is be very afraid. Then he added, and I am afraid right now. That's a chilling statement. A federal judge admitting he fears what the Department of Justice has become. And then he dismissed the case, told the defendant to get the hell out of there, told the government essentially to clean up the mess they'd created. But let's be clear, this wasn't just one judge losing his temper. This was the Constitution itself crying out through the voice of a judge. It was democracy banging on the table, demanding attention. Because what's happening in these courtrooms is not normal. It's not justice. It's a power-hungry regime using the legal system as a weapon against its own people. And it's not just protesters. It's survivors of domestic abuse. It's asylum seekers fleeing violence. It's children who grew up in America and dreamed of a better life. So here's the bottom line. Judge Zia Faruqi stood up in court and said what millions of Americans have felt. We are long past the Rubicon. The Trump regime has turned the Department of Justice into a circus of fear, and the cost is measured in ruined lives, broken families, deported students, silenced voices. The verdict is clear. This was never about justice. This was about authoritarian theater. And the only thing standing in the way was a judge with the courage to slam his gavel and say, enough. And now the responsibility falls to us. Because the judge can only do so much. The courts can only do so much. The rest is up to the people. Do we accept a government that jails protesters for drunken shouts? Do we accept courthouses turned into ambush sites for ICE? Do we accept teenagers deported to foreign countries they don't even know? Or do we stand up and say, this is not America. This is not democracy. This is not justice. Because at the end of the day, the Constitution is only as strong as the people who defend it.
Judge Faruqi defended it in that courtroom. Now it's our turn to defend it outside those walls. The gavel has fallen, the verdict is in, and the sentence will be delivered, not by one judge, but by all of us together.